Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's making headlines again, the US-China trade war. But this time, it's not just about tariffs. It's about power, perception, and survival in a global economy where every move counts. So let's start with a common myth you may have heard. If China dumps its $760 billion in US Treasuries, the American bond market will collapse. Well, that's simply not true. Sure, it sounds dramatic. But let's break it down. China holds just around 8% of foreign-held US Treasuries. Even if it sold all of them tomorrow, the impact wouldn't be a crash, it'd be more like a splash. Yeah, yields might spike briefly, but a collapse? Nah. The real damage would be to China itself. Selling off all those treasuries would devalue its own remaining holdings and trigger losses. So that threat? Mostly noise. But here's where things get serious. The US has slapped tariffs of up to 245% on Chinese goods. That's insane. And you'd think China would retaliate by tanking the yuan, right? But they haven't. Why? Because the biggest fear in Xi Jinping's mind isn't Joe Biden or Donald Trump. It's 1.4 billion Chinese citizens watching every move he makes. When you're leading a country that size, your real audience isn't Washington, it's your own people. China's been using currency policy strategically. Their exchange rate isn't floating like the US dollar, it's managed. That means they can choose to weaken or strengthen the yuan. And even with a $990 billion trade surplus last year, China let the yuan weaken, not strengthen. Why? Because in their playbook, currency is just another tool. So yeah, China can fight back in other ways too. They've said straight up, we're done responding tit for tat on tariffs. Go ahead, raise them, we won't. Now that is an interesting stance. It's not weakness. It's strategy. You see, this isn't a shouting match. It's a chess game. And both sides are playing long. In Trump's first term, China often mirrored US moves with equal force. But now? They're playing their own hand. When Trump tightened tech export rules, banning things like Nvidia's H20i chip, China didn't just respond. They pulled out the big guns, critical minerals, rare earths, semiconductors. They're not just reacting anymore. They're preempting. Why the shift? Because China's changed. Their dependency on US exports has dropped massively over the last 7 years. Back in the day, nearly all of China's trade surplus came from the US. Now, just 36% of it. That gives them room to maneuver. Plus, China's leadership is in it for the long haul. Trump might be looking at 4 more years, Xi Jinping could be in power indefinitely. Time is on their side. And you know what else gives China confidence? 3 pressure points that could really hurt the US if tensions explode. First, Apple. 95% of iPhones are still made in China. Sure, Apple's building in Vietnam and India, but that's just a sliver. If China shut down those factories for even 6 months, Apple's revenue could be slashed in half. And that would tank the stock. Not great when Apple is America's largest company by market cap. Second, Tesla. 40% of its global production comes from the Shanghai Gigafactory. If that plant halts, Elon Musk loses 40% of output. Shareholders would go nuts. Third, Walmart. 60% of products on its shelves are made in China. Slap 145 to 245% tariffs on everyday goods like baby diapers, and prices triple. American consumers won't be happy. That means political pressure at home. And China has more cards to play. They dominate the global rare earth supply, essential for everything from smartphones to fighter jets. F-35 jets alone use 400 kilograms of these materials. If China blocks exports, it's game over for US defense manufacturing. But what about China's own economic pain? Yeah, things aren't great right now. But remember, China is a state-controlled economy. In hard times, what matters is not just money, it's control. And Beijing has that in spades. They've survived famines, revolutions, and cultural upheaval. They've got high tolerance for economic pain. They can weather a slowdown if it means achieving long-term goals. And right now, they're betting on domestic demand. 80% of China's economy is now driven by domestic consumption. If they can grow that by just 5 to 10%, it more than offsets losses from US trade. That's why they're planning to inject stimulus, more than they did during the 2008 global financial crisis. Let's not forget the politics here. Trump wants China to buy more US oil, soybeans, and pork. He's got farmers and energy producers to keep happy. China, in turn, is willing to give just enough to keep the door open, but without losing face. Remember that word, face. In China, mianzi is everything. You never want to look weak in front of your people. That's why any deal has to be spun as a win for both sides. So how does this all end? Most likely, in a deal. Because both Trump and Xi know they can't afford full-scale economic destruction. They'll go right to the edge, bluff and posture, but at the last second, they'll find a way to talk. That's how you turn a war into a negotiation. And yeah, there are still wild cards, like if China pulls back from buying US Treasuries. But even that's more bark than bite. China only holds 8% of all foreign-owned treasuries. If they sold off everything, it might nudge up interest rates. But it wouldn't collapse the market. More importantly, China would hurt itself. That $760 billion would suddenly be worth less. They're not going to destroy their own assets just to spite Washington. What about currency war? If China devalues the yuan massively, yeah, it helps exports. But it also kills domestic spending power. Their economy is now consumption-driven. So guess what? A stronger yuan actually helps at home. China's not going to pick a tool that backfires. In the end, the trade war isn't about tariffs or deficits. It's about who controls the future of the global economy. And if you think this ends with just taxes on imports, think again. Next up, a financial war. Watch out for moves to open up China's capital markets. That's how they plan to absorb debt, invite foreign investors, and shift power without direct confrontation. It's brilliant if it works. So yeah, the US-China showdown is real. But it's not about who yells louder. It's about who plays the long game better. And from what we've seen, both sides are just getting started. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, give it a like, subscribe, and let us know what you think in the comments. More deep dives coming soon. Stay tuned.